Hi everybody and welcome back. I am Follygon here with another digital sculpting sketch working on another male head. This time with some new techniques from traditional sculpture. Before we get in and talk about the process though, click that subscribe button if you are new around here. And if you'd like to learn more about digital sculpting, check out gumroad.com/Follygon. There you can find my custom brushes, online courses, and some other free goodies. Everything here in the beginning of our process is going to be almost exactly the same for how I would normally work sculpting a head. I've done a little bit of some new kind of cleanup to my process in terms of speed here recently, changed a few things around, and I have found that for just nailing down the basic shapes of the head initially, my process has sped up, even if it's only a little bit. But here I am going about that process, and I'll be talking about some of the new techniques I utilize on this head to get some more visually interesting secondary forms in my surface. So this is something I've been wanting to work on a little bit more recently. I talked about that in one of our past daily sketches in terms of primary form, the most important part of your sculpture. I have been working on that for quite a long time, and I'm pretty happy with where my skills are, at least for the time being. But now I'm moving on to a little bit more of some organic secondary form. For me, this is a little bit more difficult. For others, it's probably more of a struggle with that primary form, getting those really nice big shapes nailed down. But when I recognize a weakness in my toolkit, and because I've been doing a lot of these daily head sketches, I'd like to work on that skill a little bit more. And the techniques that I'm going to show you in this video are actually pulled from traditional sculpture. I don't have a ton of experience with traditional sculpting. We'll talk more on that here in a moment, but at least for now, let's go ahead and get in all the basic landmarks, such as the nose, the lips, the eyes, and very soon here add in some ears. A lot of what I do during this process initially is just nail down a lot of the primary form, a lot of the landmarks, and not worry too much about things looking ugly, kind of sketchy, because that's kind of the purpose of this part of the process. I'll use brushes that carve into my surface to mark where certain areas need to be, and then I'll go back over them later and inflate or depress and adjust some of that form. But the importance of marking up your surface is very nice because you can look at things as a whole and then slowly start to work in on the individual aspects of each of those areas. Eyes are definitely one of those areas where people struggle a lot. For me, I've actually tweaked my process a little bit more, working on more of a realistic head. For stylized characters, I like to have a bit more control and use tubes of geometry to represent my eyelids initially. The reason for that is you get a little bit more control when you have separate objects for your geometry. When everything's just kind of combined like it is right now, you don't have quite as much control because you can't independently control the resolution of your form in specific areas. Now, if that sounds a little bit complicated, that's because it kind of is. But the main takeaway there is that the way I am working right now, for my resolution, if I want to lower it or increase it, I have to do that for everything. The other way that I was mentioning that's a little bit of a slower process that I like to do on stylized characters lets me control the resolution independently for specific areas. As you can see, I still have a lot of these very awkward hard lines on my sketch. These are just kind of landmarks for me to know where certain things are, and kind of give me an opportunity to adjust some of my form. I actually really enjoyed working on the proportion of this figure, but I tweak it at the very end. I know a lot of people don't like when I create faces that have these really exaggerated proportions. I tend to think it's fun to take the human form and kind of warp it a little bit, somewhat like a caricature. But I'll show you the final head plus a few extra tweaks at the very end of the video, and you can let me know which one you like more. So now is the part of the process here where I start integrating some of these techniques that traditional sculptors often use. And for this, I use what is called a clay brush. Big surprise, right? Well, in digital sculpting, a clay brush actually has nothing to do with traditional clay sculpture. It's just a type of brush that adds and removes form from your surface. But what's special about this workflow is the size and intensity of the brush that I use. So I am using a fairly small brush size here, and I'm using a very low intensity as well. And I'm very slowly building up and filling in specific areas. So a lot of my focus during this time was on the design of these internal forms. If you remember those hard lines that I was sketching in initially, you can still kind of see where some of those areas are, but now I'm going through and building up certain specific areas, making some areas a little bit more complex, some areas a little bit more simple, with the goal over time eventually getting up to a surface that feels a little bit more organic and like actual skin. Now with this process, it's not something that I do very often, and it's very difficult for me to control. So I overdo this quite a bit, and I reduce some of the form, like I said, at the end to make that feel a little bit more human. But this is a very similar process to what traditional sculptors will do. They will design their forms for their internal shapes, creating a lot of these large cutouts between different sections, and then very slowly, with one small piece of clay at a time, they'll go through, add it on, and kind of blend between these different areas, with the goal being to give yourself as much control as possible over these shapes. Currently, my surface looks very bumpy, and at the end of all this process, I feel like I still overdid it a little bit. I'll let you be the judge of that. But it was a very fun technique to play around with. I'm not sure if it's something that I will keep in my toolkit, because honestly, it takes a very, very long time to do. This head sculpt took me a little under 2 hours to complete, and about half of that was spent working on this process of taking these primary forms and pushing them that little bit further to start blending and smoothing out between those shapes to create something that felt a little more organic. I have some other ideas for more techniques that I can try out in the future, and I'd definitely like to experiment with those. And if you guys have ideas for other things you'd like to see me try out, let me know down in the comments below. I'm always looking for new techniques, processes, etc. to try to look at things differently and just improve my overall sculpting ability. Now I'm going through adding in a little bit of some skin texture. I'm always very scared that I'm going to overdo all this, so I try to go fairly subtle with most of it, adding in different texture to different parts of the face, so some kind of longer wrinkles up near the forehead, some smaller ones underneath the eyes, and different size pores and textures for different parts of the face. I see a lot of people rush ahead to this part of the process, and it looks like a lot of fun, but honestly, in my opinion, it's pretty boring. The more fun parts for me, at least, are designing those primary shapes that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. Those beginning stages are definitely the most difficult part, getting those primary forms down, and then like I said, for me, those secondary forms starting to make things feel a bit more organic has been very difficult for me personally to start pushing on those shapes. But that's why I'm trying out new techniques here. Let me know what you guys think of the head. So here is the head after all of that, and here is the head after a few quick proportional changes. Let me know which one you guys like more down in the comments below. And with that, you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Click that subscribe button if you are new around here, and check out gumroad.com/Follygon for all of my courses, brushes, and materials. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.